Hello, everyone. My name is Liz Klein, and I am the Vice President of Education at Common Sense Media. And it is my great pleasure to introduce our next session on the topic of digital citizenship. For those of you who may be new to our work in education, the digital citizenship curriculum teaches kids how to participate responsibly, think critically, and engage ethically online. Now, we have spent the last year completely overhauling our curriculum. It's been out for about 10 years, and we made the decision that we needed to revise. This decision was informed by research that we did with educators, where we learned that there were 3 really important, urgent concerns that educators were facing. We learned, number 1, that they were highly concerned about students' media literacy and news literacy in particular. So they were worried about misinformation, disinformation, and fake news. The second thing we learned was that digital well-being and healthy media balance and digital distraction were huge concerns. And the last thing we heard, and perhaps the most surprising, was that our current work on cyberbullying and digital drama needed to be expanded to include information on handling hate speech because many more students were encountering it. So our first presenter is going to be Dr. Kelly Mendoza, and she is responsible for creating this curriculum. She's going to be able to demo it for us today. Now, you should know that, as Jim just said, our curriculum is in about 50% of U.S. schools, and we have 730,000 registered members on our site. Now, keeping this thriving community engaged, we have our outreach team, which is led by Merve Lapus. He is our Senior Director of Educational Outreach, and he'll be our second presenter today. And he'll be talking about the whole community approach that we take. So when we go into schools to provide professional development, it's not enough just to work with educators. We need to work with educators, we need to work with students, and we also need to work with families. And this effort is so that we can build a positive culture of tech use, both in school and at home. So without further ado, please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Kelly Mendoza and Merve Lapus.
Thank you. All right. You hear me okay? You have your coffee? You have your afternoon drink? Are you ready to go? Thank you so much, Liz. So we're here to just give you a little bit of a taste of what we've been doing at Common Sense Education and give you a little overview of how we're working with K-12 schools around these issues around digital well-being. So Common Sense Education, like I said, we work with K-12 schools to empower students and educators to harness the power of technology for learning and for life. And I'll give you a little bit of taste of what we hear from students and what are some of the pain points that schools are telling us, like Liz was saying. So we know that kids have a lot of screen time in their life and have a lot of media use in their life. This is a statistic around teenage media use from our last Common Sense census study on media use in young people. 9 hours. This is outside of homework time and schoolwork time. It's a lot of time. And we also know that it's not all screen time is created equal, though. So kids are doing different things online. It's not all weighted in the same way. They may be gaming or using social media or reading. But what we do hear a lot from kids is the challenges that they're facing. And these are just some quotes that we pulled from middle school students around some of the challenges that relate to today's talk and beyond. And one of the quotes is, it can be difficult to pull away from technology. This is speaking to the conflict that kids are feeling, being constantly connected and, feeling that tug of always needing to be on their devices. Another quote, trying to stay positive and keep out of hate on social media is extremely hard. And so we're hearing a rise in concern around particularly online hate speech that kids are seeing or experiencing. but also what we continue to hear over the many years is schools dealing with things like cyberbullying, how kids are treating each other using these technologies, how they're communicating. And then big companies can sell your private information. So despite the stereotype that kids don't care about online privacy, that's very wrong. They're very concerned about their online privacy. So we also see schools taking an approach of realizing that this is a part of kids' lives and that it doesn't make sense to take the technology away. It makes sense to meet students where they're at. And so this is a quote from a guidance counselor saying, before I was like, take it away, don't do social media or Instagram, right? This is kind of a reactionary approach. But that's where they're at, so you've got to be realistic in using where they're at and help teach them how to use it in healthier ways. And that's what we do at Common Sense Education. So we do this around teaching kids what we call digital citizenship. And this is one of the many things that Common Sense Education does. We have a full set of resources and curriculum for schools that I'll show you. But sometimes when people hear that term digital citizenship, they're equating it with internet safety. And it's way beyond internet safety. It's a broad set of skills and habits of mind that we teach students. And it's all around helping them to participate responsibly and to learn and create and participate in the digital world, and in essence, be citizens of the digital world. So we offer a K-12 curriculum that was originally launched back in 2010. So it's been through a few iterations. And as Liz mentioned, we're going through a big overhaul now based on the latest research on kids and media. But we address these 6 core topics. And you can see these sort of aspirational phrases that we have kids focus on for these different topics. So one would be, we find balance in our digital lives. And this really speaks to a lot of what we're talking about today, media balance and well-being. You know, how is the technology adding value and meaning to our lives? Another one would be, we know the power of words and actions. So this is teaching kids effective communication and relationship building. And as we've been hearing over the past several years, schools are continuing to be concerned with issues that they're facing around cyberbullying, how kids are treating each other, around privacy and security issues, keeping student data safe and protected, and then also digital footprint and identity issues, like what kids are sharing and how that impacts others and themselves. But we have these emerging issues that we're hearing very loud and clear from schools, and as Liz mentioned, it is around media balance. So schools are concerned around this balance of what they're calling screen time. They're realizing not all screen time is created equal, and they want resources around that to help them and to help families as well. News literacy, of course, is a really key concern. Students can't discern credible information online. And then online hate speech, we heard loud and clear this is an issue that schools are dealing with. So we are revising our curriculum, and we're about halfway through, and we're incorporating these newer emerging concerns into that curriculum. So like I said, we have a curriculum free and available to schools thanks to our philanthropic supporters. And it is K-12. There are ways that you can teach this to the young kids and to the high schoolers. And what I want to say about the curriculum is it's a program that's a whole community approach. So we do have lesson plans that are being integrated into schools and into districts, into the curriculum. But we also have a parent education piece, because we know that when you're talking about technology and all these issues, parents are coming to schools looking for advice. They're coming looking for resources, and you have to bring them into the fold. And then also we provide professional support for educators and schools as well. So it's really a whole community approach to make digital citizenship work in a school or district. And we are going through this revision process. So over the past decade, we have partnered with Project Zero at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. They're our research partner behind this curriculum. And Carrie James and Emily Weinstein specifically, they're doing research on young people and the digital dilemmas they're facing in their everyday lives. You know, what are the dilemmas that they're hearing, that we're hearing from students? And so they're doing that research, which is informing our curriculum and the topics we address, but they're also have a unique pedagogical approach around how exactly do you teach students these skills. How exactly do you approach it? And so let me share with you just a couple of particular ways that our curriculum and our program approaches young people around these issues. Because, like I said before, it's not just about internet safety, it's a broader frame. So one is that we focus not just on skills, but on what we call habits of mind or dispositions. So this is based on a huge line of research out of Project Zero around thinking routines and dispositions, and how you're not just teaching students, again, the skills of how to do something, but how to think and react and make decisions. So an example of this, from one of Project Zero's interviews with educators, is I'm not interested in just giving them, students, a definition of sexting, because that's not going to help them make a decision at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night, right? I see people shaking their heads. So the idea is that you want to develop the dispositions and the thinking strategies for students to be able to face those dilemmas in their everyday lives to then make healthy decisions for themselves. So that's one unique approach. Another approach that we take is that we focus not just on our responsibilities for ourselves, but for others in the curriculum. So an example of this would be around teaching around digital footprint. You know, what you share about yourself is building this whole digital footprint of your identity and who you are online, and that you are responsible for your own digital footprint, but you know what? You're also responsible for other people's digital footprints in what you post about other people online. And so an example of this would be teaching students to ask permission before they post photos or information about other people online as a common practice. And so students walk out who've really gone through the curriculum. They walk out asking permission as a common practice, which is having responsibility for others. So I shared this because they're so fun, the Dig Citizens, but we do this in developmentally appropriate ways. There are ways to teach the young students and the older students. And we have these new set of characters called the Dig Citizens that we're launching with our K-2 curriculum on August 12th. And they're really fun. And each of these 6 characters relate to one of the topics I showed you earlier in the curriculum. So ARMS is about, any guesses what ARMS might be about? Media balance, right? And he's on a seesaw. LEGS is about standing up and being kind and courageous and related to the cyberbullying topic. So that's just a little taste of our younger curriculum. And then what I wanted to show you today is just a slice of the kinds of resources that we share with middle school students. So in middle and high school, we have a lot of videos and scenarios of young kids talking about their real digital dilemmas, the real challenges that they face. And so this is a video that we're going to show from a lesson, an 8th grade lesson, where students are exploring how does digital media try to hook you and what can you do about it. So we'll watch this and roll the video.
I check my phone a lot.
More than I can count.
I check it usually when I wake up in the morning.
Before school, on the bus ride to school.
During school.
A couple times each class.
At lunch.
Probably check it at break.
After school.
Walking home.
While I'm doing homework.
I'm constantly checking my phone until I go to bed.
For me personally, the positives of social media are the biggest probably that I feel connected. It's a way for me to talk to my friends at all times. When I don't have it, it really feels like I'm on another planet.
I don't really wish for the days when I didn't have my phone because it gives me so much stuff that I cherish.
I think I really enjoy social media when I am discussing issues with like-minded people or talking about things I'm very passionate about.
I like to make artwork and write, and so sometimes I'll use that as a platform to display my art.
It's fun. I like posting, I like editing pictures. It's just fun to be able to talk to my friends all the time.
I never really feel depressed or anything like that, just because there's always somebody to talk to and always somebody that's there for you. That's kind of a good thing about social media.
It has definitely created a pressure for people to keep on doing it, and I know that it's basically to keep them on the app.
The autoplay kind of helps me binge watch because if I don't get to the remote and click back, then it's just going to start playing.
It is hard to keep track of the episodes and hours when you're binge watching. I think that It's definitely a part of it.
I only have to wait 3 seconds to see what happens next, so.
I watched about 10 to 12 episodes in a day one time when I still was home from school. And I finished the first season in one day. I think I've done that twice.
There's been times where I've planned on just watching like one video, but then I've kept watching more because they're recommended, and then it just keeps going, and all of a sudden a ton of time has passed.
You know, sometimes when I'm really into the show, but I have something else I need to do, it's very hard to decide if I should click out or not. But it starts playing the next episode, I'm like, oh, it won't hurt, just one more. You find yourself like 2 hours later, and you're still watching it, and you have homework to get done.
I would say that I'm definitely hooked on my phone, very dependent on it is the word I would use. I feel that I'm very aware of this, and I'm not very happy about it.
Sometimes I wish that social media didn't have as much of an impact on my life.
I'll work, and then every once in a while I'll be like, okay, I'll take a break, and then I'll go back and check again, and then I'll check for too long, and then I waste a bunch of time that way.
It really makes you feel less whole when you realize you're putting so much energy into something that's on a little box in your hand.
It's something new, it's always exciting, it keeps your attention, and that constant turnover of adding new things definitely contributes to the amount of time people spend on it.
All right. So that's just an example of the kinds of videos and resources. Thank you. In middle and high school, because it's really important for young people to hear real stories from other young people, not scripts, not what adults think they need to hear and learn about. So an example of this is an introduction to a lesson in which they actually do explore media design, and they explore humane design and addictive design. And later in the lesson, they then think of an app or a website they spend a lot of time on, and they reflect on the design of that and reconceptualize it through a humane design lens. So students are concerned about these issues. We are teaching them, and they recognize, and they're very aware, as you can see their comments. So schools are really recognizing the importance of digital citizenship as a foundation for digital learning, and that's what Merve is going to tell you about next, is how this is playing out in the schools that we're working with.
All right. Thank you. This is literally the handoff at work. She creates all this great stuff for their team. She says, Merve, go forth. So I am here. One of the things that I love, so the rounds of applause are great, especially after the round of applause when you guys saw the content and felt like, yeah, I like that. So you guys are my classroom. I need assessment as an educator throughout every lesson I give. So if you agree with anything I talk about today, feel free to snap anyone. Snaps. And if you can't snap, like, we want to be equitable, just say yeah. Or no, can you just go oot? Like, you make that sound oot? If you agree with something that I say today, just say oot or snap. Okay? You have that in this classroom right now. I might even ask someone to read out loud for me. So get your teacher voices ready. Okay? Educator at heart. Here we go. So what does this look like? For schools and districts, digital citizenship is far more than just digital safety. It provides a foundation for learning. When kids, educators, administrators, and parents feel confident in the spaces where they learn and play, you can do great things, right? And if those foundations are in place, then we find that these platforms become an opportunity for engagement. Not just something that keeps them interested, but really, when we think about now student communication and finding their voice, when they feel confident in the spaces they're in, they can have that. When we feel like they're in a space where they can connect, collaborate, and really be effective with the way they're using media and technology, then they can innovate, right? And for teachers, for educators, when they're in spaces where they know they're confidently using the tools, it builds educator capacity to better identify the right tools, vet the right tools, and build it so that you really do have true pedagogy in the way that tools play a role in those learning outcomes, right? So digital citizenship is more than just this idea, right? It is becoming a foundation for classrooms. So I need an educator or an educator voice to stand up, read this, and project to your classroom. This is a big classroom. Who's willing to take that on for me today? Who's willing to stand up and project? I got a hand right back there. First one, just the first quote. Awesome. Who else? Oh, yeah, I got a woo-woo and then some snaps. Perfect. Next quote. Who's willing to give me this one, this last quote? Come on, class. I'll be calling out now. Oh, right here.
Kids are going into a digital world, and so it's everyone's job to prepare them. We are all technology.
This guy sounds like he knows how to speak in public. So the reality is, it's not that we have to teach these lessons, like all of us as educators, we all have to teach these lessons. But it's important that we understand and recognize that these are real issues, real complex issues that play a role in the lives of our kids and our families. It's important that we understand that there are skills that we can reinforce in our teacher practice to have these types of conversations happening in every single classroom. It doesn't just have to be the tech class, the computer lab, right? We can do this in everything we do. We should make sure these conversations are as ubiquitous as the devices in the lives of our kids and families. Because it's very complex. Our kids are complex. You're complex, right? The challenges our students are facing are not just complex because of the technology, right? But also because of the personal, ethical, moral questions that they come with, right? So as we think about the pressures to look a certain way, we think about the pressures to act a certain way, right? We're receiving it in many different places, from movies, TVs, the websites we visit, the social media we interact on. All of these pressures exist. And they almost redefine or tell you how you need to be, how you need to act, how you need to look, right? I tell my wife all the time, I'm not going to look like Dwayne Johnson. You know, you just got to have to deal with that. But, you know, healthy lifestyle, do what I can, you know, I got to deal with those things. I have my own pressures, and our kids are bombarded with these things, right? So as developers, we're either creating good resources and tools that are helping to keep these things in mind, the humaneness, the humanity, the way that our kids are complex around these pressures, or we're not designing for that, and it just continues this loop that almost drives this information to them, or it pushes more confusion, right? So there's so much we could be doing. It's not just the tech, it's also just how complex we are, so we need to keep these things in mind. How do we actually create this foundation, though? So here's a few things you don't want to do, so let's start there. One is don't design a one-and-done event, right? You can bring if you bring Taylor Swift, I'll probably remember it. But you can do these one-and-done events. It'll be memorable for a little bit, but there's a honeymoon effect to it. It goes away. If there's no one there to reinforce it or it's not aligned to anything bigger, these things are not sustainable. If you create a sign-off initiative, it becomes one more thing I have to do. As an educator, you give me one more thing I have to do. I'm already trying to teach this. I already have to act as an administrator. I'm already doing this. Just to sign off to do it doesn't buy me in, right? I can't assume also that all leaders are tech experts. They're creating the policies. They're helping to guide us, but they're doing it through a single frame or single lens of where they're at. We must bring in diverse voices from educators to students and the community to help identify where and how these things will fit in our classrooms. Don't fall for tech is ruining our students' lives and how we have to do something now about it. The reality is if we don't meet our kids where they're at, it's DOA right on arrival, right? It's dead on arrival. We need to make sure that we're not being didactic, that it's not punitive or fear-based. Otherwise, this is a part of their lives. The fact is, our kids are mentally and developing to be where they're at, which is with their friends. They need to be with their friends. And more families are saying, oh, no, you need to be home at this time. You have this, this, and this, and then you come home. Our kids aren't free exploring the community until the lights turn up at night. That's what I used to do, right? So if they're not going to be doing that with their friends, they're going to be doing that where they are. And that is in these spaces, these digital spaces. So we have to design around that. And then let's not make digital citizenship its own filter bubble. Too often they say, Merve, we need you to come in. There was a sexting issue. Well, the reality is if we just address sexting, there's so much more to that. We need to understand gender bias. We need to understand these gender norms and pressures, what's appropriate information to share, what's not appropriate. We need to break it down and even go lateral and really think about what this all means, not just assume it into this one linear idea. Things that you can do is make sure that you are always connecting that these dilemmas exist and identifying when kids are really looking at these issues and supporting them in their classroom. Assess your online culture. Just because you don't know about it doesn't mean it's not happening, right? Design a plan that aligns to your school initiatives. Social emotional learning, 21st century learning skills. If it is connected to something under a bigger umbrella, it can be reinforced and it can be longer lasting. Empower your staff to define content delivery and become curious advocates. Again, don't just have leadership define this, bring in different perspectives, because if it doesn't connect down on the ground, it's going nowhere, okay? Deliver on your outcomes and celebrate your progress with your community. If good things are happening, you need to celebrate those wins, especially when they are voices coming from your own students and your own educators. And it's celebrate the diverse voices, not just the one that did the TED Talk, but the one that stood up in front of the staff and actually talked for the first time, right? Identify those opportunities and really celebrate them, build them up, right? And this can look many different ways. Here's just a quick snapshot of a district in Maryland that did it, where they had over 206 schools, 160,000 kids almost, and they knew that it was going to take them a while. So they did a 3-year commitment to addressing it and just getting a baseline. Their baseline was just becoming common sense recognized. And what they did is they identified leaders at every school, counselors, teachers, librarians, and they said, all right, we'll start here. Let's get instruction happening in all of our classrooms. Let's get parents engaged. After that, what happened? They now became the leaders and the trainers to get all classrooms engaged. And they are now going around and making sure that the media understands, here's what we did as a school district, right? And they're now reinforcing that by being able to go deeper and look at where these further alignments happen, right? In this room, there are many of you guys doing this work already. Quick show of hands. How many of you guys are already common sense recognized educators? Raise your hands. Guys, look around for these hands. Yeah. How many of you guys represent a school that's a common sense recognized school? How many of you guys represent a district that is a common sense recognized school district? Right? These are people you should look to talk to later. Really get a sense of what they're doing with their communities. We got a happy hour later. Toss something back and be able to have a nice, great conversation that way. Right? Educators do it all the time, after school. We're about to hand this off to others, but last hands up, who has any questions? For myself or Dr. Mendoza? This is real quick. This is what we do. You got it all? You soaked it all in? Oh, we're over here. Biggest obstacle is time. Oftentimes we feel like the challenge of implementing is like, oh, we just have no time. And the reality is because we're looking at it as a linear thing. We need to add something on. But when we're looking at it, it's a part of building our practice. When we do research, we should really have this value of validating the content that we're exploring, not just to try to find how it's trying to mislead us, but develop these practices in the way that we instruct. Right? And that's reinforcing it, not necessarily having to deliver it in every single classroom. Yep. Oh, one more question?
Mm-hmm. Restorative justice-based response, so we do this, things still happen.
Yep.
Is there some kind of a toolkit maybe for educators, like once something goes down in your school, how do we address it?
Yeah, so there are a number of ways that we've seen our resources used. We got a contingency from San Francisco Unified here. One of the things they first aligned us to was the restorative justice, so restorative practices. Because the reality is there are going to be things that happen. So when they happen, you need to address them, right? But that means having to kind of go through this really cumbersome process and really try to find different ways we need to solve this one particular issue. But then that's not sustainable over time. You've learned nothing from it except for putting out a fire. So prevention and really trying to find ways to do this are going to be important ways. So we've got a number of training tools that allow for educators to kind of think this way, and especially administrators kind of take a step back and think about what does this mean for us. This fall, we'll be releasing a whole new implementation guide to get schools really thinking about what are some of the really positive case studies that we've seen working with schools, how have they worked, and provide you some resources to really kind of think about where are some areas that we might not have thought about, and how can we start addressing those steps. And then, really providing more opportunities where we can even potentially even get common sense out to supporting it, whether they be digitally or in person. These are things we're currently exploring, but there are opportunities to learn just right from the site. I think that is it. Thank you all. Woo-woo!